Good morning and a very warm welcome to everybody present here in the session. We are now officially starting the session. Our esteemed panelists, ladies, gentlemen, and dear students, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Chirag Bhandari, and I'm the founder and CEO at Innoble Social Innovations, and I will be your host for this session. As many of you are already aware, we're doing a series of webinars on a very critical issue: COVID impact on rural schools, learning loss, dropout, child labor, and why continued investment in education is a must. Uh, the topic for today's webinar is Connecting Students to Education, Part 3, wherein there'll be a panel discussion between the CSR experts, development professionals, and educationalists in science field. To begin with, I would like to start with a good news. Several states such as Karnataka, Punjab, Bihar, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, etc., have reopened schools. Several other states such as Maharashtra, Telangana, etc., which are also in many cases one of the worst hit states, during both the first and the second wave of COVID-19, have not taken a call on reopening schools as of now because there's a fear of third wave, but are seriously considering about reopening schools soon. And now, you know, the entire 16, 17 months of lockdown, what it really means is that students uh, essentially are going through a learning loss and the dropouts, like I explained earlier. Now, to understand the dropout scenario, it's clear that the pandemic has caused enormous economic devastation, and therefore it's quite possible that a large number of kids may have dropped out. There are several cases, several studies which are suggesting that students between 12 to 17 years of age have been asked by their parents to work in shops, to work in farms, to do household chores, to increase the family income in some other way. And there's a fear that these students could permanently have dropped out, and most certainly their parents would not be interested in sending them back to school. And therefore, knowing this, we must do everything possible to ensure that the most vulnerable groups, the most vulnerable families and their kids don't drop out. Every possible measure should be taken right now to not let it happen. And talking about learning loss again, I mean, 16 to 17 months of dropout. And here we're not talking about just 16 to 17 months of not learning happening, but also a lot of content or a lot of information that student did had acquired and was with them when the pandemic started is also lost. So we'll have to start at a much lower level now. Uh, and there are reports that are suggesting that 92% of students have lost fundamental capabilities in language. 86% kids have lost fundamental capabilities in mathematics. And though in cities we might not get a real view of the situation, but the situation is really much worse in the rural India. And imagine 200 million children going to enter schools with this deficit. So we need to have a thorough, rigorous, systematic plan on how to deal with this. And obviously, COVID is not gone. I mean, we might have certain phases of lockdown, and we might have situations wherein schools might be shut again for a few time, for a month or a week. And we need to be really prepared for those lockdowns, and we need to figure out ways as to how students can continue education. So the space is that there is an emergency in education. And here at Ennoble, we feel that there's an eminent need to bring people who understand teaching learning processes around discipline, and those who are committed to investing in education, to get them on a common platform to discuss the various possible solutions, and then to test these solutions with the students in collaboration with our partners, and obviously with the community for its effectiveness. As you all already know, that this webinar is a series of webinar, which is an organized attempt to do exactly that. We will be making a genuine attempt to record all these learnings, all the questions and all the possible solutions, and then possibly deploy them into the various interventions that we are conducting. Uh, uh, and we have about We have about 50 odd participants with us today. And I would like to acknowledge you all for making out time and being a part of this webinar. It's a Thursday morning and it's a working day, and you making out time and being a part of this webinar is really appreciable, because it goes to show that there is a commitment towards rural education transformation. Uh, as I said, this webinar is organized by Ennoble Social Innovations, and to give you a brief roundup of what we are doing at Ennoble Social Innovations, Ennoble Social Innovation is a startup focused on developing sustainable and scalable solutions for schools to create better learning outcomes. We have our flagship program, Yellow Green School, wherein we deliver on holistic transformation of rural schools through better infrastructure and better quality education. Uh, and and we have imagined infrastructure and better quality education at scale. So we have devised scalable and modular products to be able to transform school infrastructure at scale. And and while doing that, we're also very concerned about inculcating the right sustainability habits among students. Hence, we've used a lot of recycled, upcycled material in all our infrastructural products so that students can be sensitized about sustainability from very early age. And also, we are focused on bringing in better quality education at scale uh, through various uh, latest pedagogies and by aligning ourselves with NEP 2020. Now, a brief background about us. We are also incubated at IIM Bangalore NSRCL and with AICRMP. So that way we are a startup. We were founded in August 2018, and we've rapidly expanded across 58 districts and partnered with probably 76 plus corporates. Some of the awards that we have received is the Maharashtra State Innovation Award, the CIMIXTEX Entrepreneurship Award in Mexico, Arohan Innovation Award by Infosys, and a few more. And we're very proud of our academic partnership with Vidya Bhavan Society, which was founded in 1931, and since then has been working in the space of education. Uh, at present, Vidya Bhavan Society has grown to be a consortium of 13 institutions. I'm also happy to announce that on today's panel, we will be featuring a rich array of high-level speakers. These are people who have really deep knowledge about their disciplines, and we all hope to gain a lot from the upcoming discussion. Please allow me to introduce them to you. Our first speaker is Mr. Kamal Mahendru. Uh, he is one of the education leads at Vidya Bhavan Education Resource Center. Mr. Kamal is a master in physics, has been deeply involved in the education for children in rural areas across over the last 30 plus years. His body of work includes a deep involvement in the field of science and mathematics. He's played an instrumental role in curriculum development, teacher capacity building, and field implementation. Currently, he looks after the larger issues of education at Vidya Bhavan Education Resource Center. His theoretical understanding across a variety of related issues has been consolidated during a 2-year sabbatical at UNSW Australia. Our second speaker for today is Mr. Kisan Gopal Ladha. He is the CSR lead, Central and North India Tata Consultancy Services. A mechanical engineer, Kisan joined TCS in 2006 as design engineer. While working with the TCS and being a part of several volunteering activities, Mr. Kisan discovered he has a passion for community service, particularly towards improving literacy amongst marginalized communities. To pursue his passion, Kisan joined Teach for India's pioneering batch 2009 to 11, where he taught in the slums of Pune and Dharavi, post which he decided to dedicate himself and work towards community service full time. He's currently leading TCS flagship audit adult literacy program, which has so far empowered over 1 million illiterate people by making them literate and helping them build a foundation towards self respect, confidence, and self reliance. Our third speaker Mrs. Priyanka Singh, Director Program Implementation, WaterAid India. Mr. Priyanka Singh is a graduate of IRMA and has over 24 years of experience in the development sector. Very interestingly, Mrs. Priyanka Singh brings in a very unique double-sided perspective of NGO and CSR spaces both. Uh, she has worked on the ground and also worked as at the top level of NGOs and CSRs. And besides this, she has also been part of research partnerships with some of the best academic and research institutes across India. She has spent about 21 years at Seva Mandir, of which she was also a chief executive, post which she worked with Interglobe Group of Companies as CSR head, as CSR head of Interglobe Foundation for close to 3 years. She's currently heading the program implementation with WaterAid India. Mrs. Priyanka has been on several boards in the nonprofit world and academic institution and has been a member of government networks and government bodies also. And lastly, I would like to introduce you to our fourth speaker, who also happens to be our mentor, Mr. Prasoon Kumar, an MA in Political Science and Sociology. He is an eminent education advisor working with Vidyavan Society. He has close to 24 years of experience in diverse educational roles. He has been closely associated with various states and national schools education improvement program, including textbook writing, teacher training, and policy and curriculum development. And he has been a guiding force behind organizing these discussions also. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our esteemed guests and panelists. It's really a privilege to have to have you all share your ideas and opinions with us. And finally, before we get started with the panel discussion, a few logistical announcements. Uh, we would like to hear from you. However, it is not really possible to have all the questions asked on the mic. So please feel free to use the chat to type in your questions. Uh, you would be put on mute during the while the webinar is being conducted. So apologies for that, but you can use the chat to communicate your views. This discussion is also being streamed live on the Facebook, and you can use the link which will now come in the chat to share with your friends and family. A recorded version of the webinar would be available on the Yellow Green YouTube channel. Our social media handles will also be put up in the chat very soon, so you can press like, subscribe, and stay connected to the conversation. The session is designed to last for about 75 to 80 minutes. Request you all to be present for the entire duration of the event. So with that said, I would like to invite our first speaker for the morning, Mr. Prasoon Kumar, to share his views and to set up the context for this discussion.
Thank you, Chirag. So let me start talking about the road we traveled from first webinar to now the fourth one. So we started with the idea. So the last two was on subject specific maths, language, and maths, and the fourth one is now about science. So Kamalji will be talking about it. So collectively, we have evolved from first to the fourth webinar now. We started the webinar thinking that COVID discontinued children's learning and we need to fix it. Yeah. So, so the most common visible sign which we can take is children lacking ability to read and understand the subjects which they were learning in the school without proper adult supervision. Simply put, they just can't read a text with understanding. Not only that, most of them can't read with understanding even the text of their preceding grades. The more subject becomes abstract, the more is the difficulty level for children. The learning trajectory one can see from simple story to grammar to science to maths is from the level of difficulty of learning. Therefore, in assessing students' learning problem, we need to look at the way we teach or have been teaching children and the way we should be teaching children in future. That that's the reason why we got subjects experts to talk about what are the problem in subjects and how do we fix it. So last two webinar, we heard Professor Ramakant Agnihotri, Dr. Diwan on language and maths respectively. Today we have Kamalji. He dedicated his life trying to make science meaningful for children and school and children from his Hosangabad science teaching experiment days to now at Vidya Bhavan. So most of those who know about HSTP, it's a pioneering teaching project in India which influenced many. And now, of course, it's a normal, new normal, the webinar. So over to you, Chirag, to reach Kamalji and to start the process. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to now invite our guest speaker, who is from Tata Consultancy Services, Mr. Kisan Gopal Ladda, to share his views on this topic upfront. Mr. Kisan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chirag. Thank you, Prasunji, for setting up the context, and greetings to everyone present in the call. Happy to be here with you. And thanks to the virtual mode that people, we are right now sitting in so many different places across the country, possibly globe, are coming together. So I think certainly, as shared, the COVID has brought in a difficult situation, and in my opinion, as virtually we are connecting together, though it has brought in lots of difficulties and challenges across the spectrum, but it has also brought out the virtuous engagements that are possible. And speaking from the space of where I am engaged in last 16 years of my career with Tata Consultancy Services, I take immense pride that the very foundation of Tata's is rooted in contributing back to community. And I'm heading our adult literacy program, which is Chirag shared is has benefited more than 1,078,000 people across the country, and in a couple of other countries outside the world. But today, I think I would like to speak about some of the innovations that we are doing in TCS, and one of them is, I think, how to engage our associates to volunteer and come forward in our program. So allow me to share my screen, and we'll just take you through some of the aspects. And another thing that I feel is very, very contextual and important is piece on education in 21st century, as Chirag brought out right in the beginning. So we are inviting all our associates. I was sharing few sometimes back. Well, in terms of the contribution, financial contributions that TCS and Tata's make is certainly significant. TCS last year crossed more than 2% of its committed, or rather complied, contribution towards CSR. But what we encourage more is that how, instead of just leveraging the financial capital, how to bring out the human capital, intellectual capital, and knowledge capital. And that's where we are inviting our associates and team members, everyone across TCS, 500,000 people plus, to sign up to find out what is their purpose, with the hashtag what is my purpose. And I think, as I am sort of finding out, or possibly trying to live up to my purpose, the invitation goes to all our people, wherein and TCS's CSR arms, we say that tagline is TCS empowers, and vision is to empower people and communities while connecting people to opportunities in the digital economy. We are in the 21st year of 21st century, and digital, as we have witnessed and right now experiencing, cannot be taken away. But keeping that in mind, how do we build an equitable, inclusive pathway for women, youth, and marginalized groups? And for that, the key programs that we have are revolving around education, skilling, employment, and entrepreneurship. And with all these tags, we see that how our multiple forms of capitals, how do that come alive, and more to that, how we engage the human capital, wherein every human being comes up with their own knowledge capital as well towards the geared specific programs. And there again, at Tata Group level, we have multiple engagement possibilities. I'm not getting into this whole flow. I think the focus on the program would be more relevant here. So I'll touch upon more on Go IT and Ignite My Future, which I believe is pretty much relevant, as I was following the news yesterday that how as schools are opening, there is a resistance even in the mainstream communities to go to schools because the contextual relevant of the content is missed out. And in 21st century, the skills ought to be also in sync and relevance with what is needed at time. And I don't want to discriminate here with the best of the schools or even the schools at the grassroots level. Without any doubt, the resources and infrastructures at the grassroots levels are certainly challenging. But with whatever limited resources are, leveraging whatever the capacities that the teachers can be imparted with in partnership with certain other engagements, how do we strengthen that? And then I think one of the key program that we do, I won't touch much upon that, which is youth employment program, wherein as we know that of the people, as Chirag was highlighting that, and we know the ASER reports and multiple other reports at how of 100 students who enroll, only possibly 10% graduates. And amongst them, for engineering, less than 30% of those who graduates are employable immediately. So how to impart employment skills to them, bringing the industry knowledge and prepare these people. And one of the other flagship intervention that we have is to encourage rural entrepreneurship. Digital is the path even for the rural. So we are building in partnership with multiple entities, these rural entrepreneurs who are serving. And in COVID time, we have seen that how this rural entrepreneur being a catalyst has contributed phenomenally. So maybe we'll take some more time on our Go IT and Ignite My Future program. Adult literacy is something I since it is one of the piece that is really core to my heart, and also why I want to spend, forget about this 100,000 learners through 100,000 volunteers, that is for internal TCSs. But this is an appeal that we are placing amongst the organization itself, that in our vicinity, as we know, and I'm again re-quoting this statement, that 21st year of 21st century, in our country, we have 250 million plus illiterates. And with these 2 years of the break that COVID is putting up, this number is not going to come down, unfortunately. And what can we do to address that? And the solution that TCS has come up with, that 50 hours, 50 to 55 hours spread over 3 months of time, can impart functional literacy with reading, writing, arithmetic modules on any device, with the help of any device. Earlier, it was just limited to computer or laptop. Now we have converted it into MP4 version so that it can be deployed on any device, for that matter, a cell phone as well, or a TV, which can host a pen drive. And another addition that we are doing is to build on foundational functional literacy. Financial literacy and digital literacy are again need of the hour. So that's what on adult literacy programs front we are doing. Bridge IT, I won't take you much. Just allow me to spend few more minutes on our uh, this in context to education. This is a picture, if you see in the right, wherein on asking that what is computational thinking, generally people would create the buzz of computers and things like that. And we know that that's not right. In fact, there is a myth and misunderstanding that only IT or computer science engineer can work in an organization like TCS, or for that matter any IT organization. But we know, I am a mechanical engineer, and there are more than 50% of 5 million people, or maybe I think more than 60%, who are from non-ITCS background, not just in TCS, but across the IT group. We don't have these many IT or computer science engineer in the first place. And second, the most important thing which is needed is, which now for the fourth industrial revolution, as we realize, even World Bank is bringing out these 10 key aspects, that how analytical thinking, innovation, complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, leadership, social influence, all these aspects are essential, very, very important. And as we know, we that 50% of the current employees will need to be upskilled or reskilled to remain employed. And the jobs that these students who would graduate, my daughter is 5 years, 10 years down the line, certainly the job spectrum would have absolutely changed. Right now, I'm working from home, working for home as well. things have changed because of COVID drastically. So keeping all these perspective in time, how do we focus on these 21st century skills on computational thinking particularly, and then design thinking absolutely as well, and bringing in awareness on students who two of the key flagship programs that TCS offers. Again, we engage lots of associates to volunteer, come forward, who contribute, bringing in their own, design thinking skills, computational thinking skills, and impart this knowledge to teachers and the community at large. And just again, maybe touch upon very briefly about a minute on GoIT and Ignite My Future. The intent of this program is to impart it seems someone is on unmute. Okay, great, thanks. So it's about 6 to 20 hours of program designed for students from first standard onwards. We in fact tried and did a pilot with the engineering students and came up with some incredible learnings. The students who had never presented in their life, after a few hours of training on empathy, design thinking, problem solving skills, and coming up with the solution that is close to their heart, leveraging all these aspects, and again connected with SDGs. Some phenomenal examples came. First graders surprises us with their empathy and the thoughts that they have. And I'm not speaking about all the great colleges or even the great schools. We have tried, tested it in even regional medium schools in Marathi, in even Andhra Pradesh with AP Swari's education systems, and phenomenal results. And we engage TCS and our clients as mentors to handhold these students and provide them a safe space to learn, nurture their skills and the confidence, and certainly demystifying the kind of so-called design thinking and computational thinking myths around that. On Ignite My Future, our again key offerings are to one of the big thing I feel this program is serving is to have a cross pollination of various subjects. Usually when maths is taught, only we speak in terms of mathematical terms, but not a single mathematical problem is derived of other aspects of life. And hence how to build that connect with science, even language arts and social studies, and have a cross pollination of interdisciplinary approaches, and to see that how leverage the industry experts and resources that we have generated and are creating to impart to the communities of people across the spectrum. So I think I would not get into the approaches and other aspects. Would be happy to hear from you all if there is any question or any thoughts around these pieces. And towards the end, just would like to share, again, I'm using this phrase a third time, 21st year of 21st century. Just by quoting 21st century skills, we would not be able to attain anything. I am very well aware with our literacy program working in 20 states in hinterlands that how even the state of functional literacy is so bad. And when we speak about computational thinking, design thinking skills, it's a world apart. But if we would not prepare and would not ignite multiple forms of capitals towards the best of the education for every individual, whether it is an illiterate human being or a student who is to start a school or a dropout or even an engineering or any bachelor's graduate towards building a better nation. So would love to hear from you. Any question, reflections would be welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to you, Chirag.
Thanks, Kisam, and really, really deep insights from your on-ground experience. I'm sure everybody would have kind of benefited from these insights. And with that, I would now like to welcome our next speaker for the morning, Mr. Kamal Mahindru. Mr. Kamal Mahindru, over to you.
Thank you, Chirag. First of all, of course, I need to thank Ennoble and the entire team for facilitating this webinar and this churning of thoughts that has gone into preparation for this webinar. Before I begin my presentation, I think I'm duty bound to acknowledge my very deep debt to 30 years and over of my engagement in the Hoshangabad Science Teaching Program, to all my teachers, my colleagues, my fellow teachers in schools, and thousands and thousands of children with whom I got an opportunity to work and learn over these 30 years. And what I'll be sharing with you today is an attempt to distill from all that experience that I gained from all that. And I owe a very deep debt to all of them, the institutions that facilitated it, Kishore Bharti and then Eklavya, and now Vidya Bhavan. To all I owe a deep debt. To immediately come to my issue, you see, COVID has led to loss of learning for millions of children across the country, particularly those in the primary and upper primary classes, the first 8 years of school, what we call the elementary stage. And while the nature of loss of learning in language and mathematics is obvious, and it is equally important to pay attention to the loss of learning in context of the sciences, both natural and social. So what is this loss of learning in sciences that we need to worry about and do something? That is a question that I think we all need to together think about. At the outset, I must confess that I hold no brief for the market myth of forcing content-heavy science on children in early years, raising false hopes of parents that this will give them a head start in the rat race for admissions to elite professional institutions. I am more concerned with the major objective of teaching sciences from the early years, that is to nurture the inherent curiosity in every child, to explore, to know, to understand the world around them. You see, this urge to know more and share one's knowledge with others provides the impetus for developing a wide array of cognitive, analytical, comprehension, and articulation skills that help the curious child to mature into a lifelong learner. And so, this long journey of perpetual learning and knowledge construction begins with curiosity and questioning. We all must have experienced the inexhaustible questions that young children begin to ask even in the preschool years. Often irritated, we adults tend to discipline such a flood of questions. The first step in a child's intellectual growth is to encourage such questioning and helping it mature into a facility of systematic questioning and learning ways to find answers. That basically lays the foundation for scientific thinking and knowledge building. I think with that as a larger goal, I think over the years, not only in our country, but across the world, there is a general agreement that teaching of science must aim to help children do science, not just learn from textbooks, but do science themselves. And hence, over the years, there has been a lot of emphasis that, we need to move towards activity-based learning. In Hoshangabad, we used to have these three sort of slogans: learning by doing, learning by discovery, and learning from the environment. So doing, discovery, and environment, these are the three kingpins around which teaching of science in the early years needs to be organized. The basic objective is to train the children in the method of science, in using scientific method to understand the world around them. The first thing that it means is training children, encouraging children to question. So as you can see, this very effectively means that our first goal is to enhance the inherent curiosity and urge to learn about the world around them that every child comes with. It's not that we'll have to suppress some of these inherent qualities in children to load onto them some other knowledge which we think is more relevant. Fundamentally, it will be very important to understand that our goal is to enhance the inherent tendencies and qualities that every child comes with. And what is the most effective way to do it? It is the environment, the world around the child itself that provides the motivation and the means and the resources to develop these qualities of children. So curiosity must lead to systematic questioning. Systematic questioning also is based upon observation, the next very fundamental step in the method of science. So encouraging children to observe closely, and again to observe systematically and record their observations. And what does systematic observation mean? Not only looking at something at one instance, but trying to do a systematic observation over a period of time or across different locations, and bringing all these observations, recording all these observations and organizing it into some sort of coherent data. And it is this process of putting our observations together, organizing it into coherent data, and from that developing a sense of change that is taking place, a sense of interrelationships that are there between different factors that bring about that change, the interdependencies, and eventually a deeper understanding of the phenomena that is taking place around us. So as you can see, the whole process of from questioning to observation to organizing observation begins to generate a certain knowledge base for the child herself about the various phenomena, social and natural, around her. Of course, that is not where the process ends, because I think it's also inherent in us that whatever we understand, whatever we learn, we want to share it with others, because that's the best way to verify whether what we have concluded is valid or not, whether it is close to the truth or not. So this has to be followed into a process of sharing with others, sharing your observations, sharing your understandings, and getting to know what others have learned about the same thing, whether it is your immediate colleagues, friends, peers, or somebody else around, or even somebody whom you believe is an expert who knows about that phenomena. One thing, of course, I'll say that what all I have said as the aim of science education is not something new, and if I share with you what our curricular framework documents say in this 2-3 hurried slides that I have put together, well, this is just to in a sense generate a confidence that sorry, okay. So for example, I just taken this excerpt from the NCF 2005 and the Statement of Objectives of Environmental Studies, which is what formally we call in our school curriculum. Class 3 to 5 children are studying environmental studies, and these are the listed objectives. And I hope you'll agree with me that what all I tried to say earlier is roughly summarized in, or rather presented in a more organized way here. Or the other interesting thing is that our school syllabus also is organized around themes. This again is taken from the NCERT document, syllabus for the elementary education years. So as you can see, if you look at the syllabus, the textbook, you can discern that these are the major themes around which the learning in science is organized. So rather than put it in very sort of scientific language and terminology, the attempt is to introduce science through very familiar experiences and terms that are part of every child's life. Similarly, as we move on to class 6 to 8, where science and social sciences get separated as two subjects, again, the themes are, we continue this theme approach, and basically we are trying to build up concepts and ideas based on child's own environment, the world around them. I think I just wanted to sort of give confidence that I'm not saying that we have to do something away from the syllabus, but we have to interpret the syllabus, the spirit behind the syllabus and the curriculum framework as the NCF 2005 states it. I think I'll stop there with just a song that I remember, and I don't remember it well enough. In good times, we will sing of good times, but even in bad times, we will sing of good times. I think our response to this COVID crisis needs to be motivated in that way. Thank you, Chirag. I think I'll stop there. Probably I've overrun my time.
Thank you so much, Sir, for these deep, intricate understanding of how science can be acquired by a student, the process of doing discovery, environment, and also questioning, observing, organizing, and peer learning and continuous sharing, and also how a proper contextual understanding of textbook is important amongst teachers, and all the stuff is out there. But I think once that understanding is built, we can really have teachers deliver on what is expected out of them. So with that note, I would like to now move on to Mrs. Priyanka Singh. She, like I said, has a very unique experience of managing NGO and corporates, and I'm really looking forward to some insightful ideas from her in this session. Over to you, Mrs. Priyanka Singh.
Thank you, Chirag. So like all the previous speakers, I also thank everybody. And since a lot of stuff has been said about science teaching, and also that I do not pretend to know that I know how science is taught, and definitely not how science can be learned. So let me just come to the aspects of just learning and teaching and COVID times. So if I were to just focus on children's education and COVID and not get into the specific subject wise, because that I think Kamalji is covered very well. So there are certain there's certain kind of children, certain categories who were already on the margins, and these children would be on the margins either because of their own social and economic context, poor, marginalized, disadvantaged, living in physically challenged areas, or the physical availability of schools was still low. And I think even though we keep saying that the physical availability and enrollment has gone up, that's not really the right figure, because you also have to look at the DICE data, which also keeps showing you how many children are moving out of school every year. So there are certain categories of children who were already on the margins, both in terms of denied physical access to school and low learning abilities, which I think Prasoon also mentioned, Kamalji also mentioned. Then there are other kids who have also been on the margins because of, let's say, they are in a perpetual lockdown kind of a situation, whether it is Kashmir or it is parts of the Naxal areas in our country, but there are. The COVID has made such children's situation even more precarious, whether it is because of a loss of life in their families, loss of incomes, and or both, and both. Definitely the schools being closed and the digital unavailability. And there's not also a literary context within in most of such places that we're talking about. Apart from the school, there is no other literary context that's there in these children's lives. Whether you look at, like, whether it is an existing library or just random books in somebody's house or magazines or whatever. No. In fact, the only context that now even most of these kids have and their families have is WhatsApp. And everything that comes on WhatsApp is then that's what is religion, that is what is your ideology, and so on. So what has happened also to many of these, and I think again, it was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier, that what has happened is that because these children were already in a precarious, difficult situation, the COVID kind of added to that difficulty, that a lot of children moved on to other things. Child migration, certain parts of the country already has a lot of migration. So after the first wave, during the second wave, a lot of when things started opening in, a lot of children started going for work, either in neighboring areas or neighboring states or something else. Marriages of adolescents increased, especially adolescent girls. Schools are places for learning, but schools are also, in a way, safety net for a lot of children that we're talking about today. They are a safety net from early marriages. They are a safety net from child labor. So once the safety net went away, you also had children who moved on to other things. Now, the important thing to remember is that there are children whom we've lost for good, maybe. Will be very, very difficult to bring them back. And of course, there are children, like I said, who are almost in a perpetual lockdown situation, COVID or no COVID. Now, one can say, well, we are nearing the end of the COVID, whatever time it takes. So we need not worry so much about this special situation that happened, that the schools stayed closed for long times. The point I'm wanting to make is that for certain kind of children, the schools are anyways almost permanently closed for a lot of time. Number one. And number two, we may end up having such disruptions even in a non-pandemic form. And Kashmir, of course, is an example of that, but there are other examples also. So having now restated the problem like that, what is it that I feel that we can do in such situation? Both science learning and learning in general. What is it that we can do more? My general answer, and though it is general, I think that because it is general, it is what we're looking for. But my general answer is that we need a response that is, and here I've chosen my words a little carefully, we need a response that is agile. That's really agile. That's quick, that's adaptive, and that's localized. So we need a response in such situations, a response to ensure that children continue to learn, and learning offers them a safety net from the other things that they face in their lives, that the response is agile and adaptive. Now, if we want a response that is agile and adaptive and quick, then how do we go about doing it? Now, that's where we get into the specifics and the difficult part. The general answer that was good. I think nobody will disagree that we need a response that is agile and quick. The difficult part is how do we go about doing it? Who does what? And let's say we talk of three broad sets of people and what can they do. And I'll start with CSR because I think in some ways it's not so difficult for CSR to change their response. And of course, I say it with humility, but I also say it with confidence because I've been in that seat for a while. So I think, therefore, what the CSR can do is really fine-tune their funding. Fine-tune their funding or adapt their own funding to support agile and adaptive responses. If CSR continues to align its funding and CSR support to meet compliance only and to look at touch and feel outputs and outcomes, easy to demonstrate, easy to evaluate, not easy to achieve, but easy to evaluate kind of outcomes, then we will never have kind of responses that are quick, that are local, that are decentralized, because all of this kind of response needs an autonomous institution and autonomous person. Like Kamalji said, you need a facilitator who is a paratrooper. The big question again is, how do you create that person? Most of us are not even autonomous in our thinking in everyday lives. And now you're thinking that we're all the time second guessing what is expected of us. Now, and we are talking of teachers, we want of teachers, we want of responses, which will be adaptive in that. So I think what CSR can do and can really be a front runner in is adapt their funding, adapt their CSR support to enable such kind of responses. And like I said, I say it with humility, but I also say it with enough confidence to say that it is doable. It's not difficult. So if people start talking, but nahi CSR to ji 3+1 4 saal ka hi karna hai, quarterly report bhi dena hai, MCA ke format bhi, it's doable. That's the easy part. As government, I think my ask is the most difficult. But we have been asking from the government some piecemeal stuff, whether it is in the curriculum framework that was flashed now, whether it is in textbook writing, teachers training. What we really need to is also work on all these different, we need to continue working on these discrete aspects, because each of them add great value, but also start looking at the institutional structures in which they are housed. So we need to start asking from the government to create autonomy and self-motivation and critical thinking within their own staff, within their own institutions. Most government institutions, I'm not saying corporates and NGOs don't do it, but most government institutions, their ability, most of the time they're looking up. Their accountability is not below, their accountability is up. That you keep looking up, keep your bosses, higher ups happy, look at them, second guess, look at your, that needs to change. You have to start thinking for yourself, even if it's a wrong thinking. Like I said, it's a difficult ask, but can we start thinking of in somewhere recreating or rebuilding? Because it's also not difficult. It's not as if we've not had such institutions. We've had, and we still have. But today it is largely individual driven, not institutional driven. You have a good officer, it's done. The officer goes. So start looking for autonomy within the government. NGOs is the third and the last category. I think the NGOs need to really do a lot of soul searching. If they want to be really localized in their response, if they want to be appropriate and adaptive in their response, they need to do soul searching. It is easier for them than the government because they are more flexible. Most of them started on intentions and ideology, not on compliance. So it is so much easier for them to do an honest critical assessment of their institutions and their work and come up with solutions that make more sense based on the situation. I think they have to keep themselves away from the allure of scale and sellability. Both are again virtues. Scale is desirable, so is sellability desirable, but that shouldn't become for them the key parameters on which to evaluate the programs. Maybe the vulnerability that the NGO sector is facing today, both vulnerability because of the regulatory framework as well as loss of finances, that more and more NGOs are getting into this whole stuff of what sells is what makes sense, and what is not scalable is not sellable. I'm not too sure. I think they have to keep balancing and asking, really doing some honest critical assessment. See, if you're talking about people living in precarious conditions, children living in precarious conditions, We know how to ensure good science teaching. Kamalji just gave a talk on that. He can give a longer talk on that. You want to get into specific. But what they need to ask, what each one of us needs to, wait, how do I take it to the village? How do I do it? Because I don't think that's so self-evident. And if it was self-evident, we wouldn't be here today. So that's the real question. And there, I think the NGOs are more suited to do it. But they need an enabling environment. But also, these are not NGOs who are getting born today. Most of them have had 10, 20, 40, 50 years of experience. So they can really come up with some honest assessment and say, hey, look, this is what we can do. So I'll end here, Chirag, and leave some questions behind and say, let's not just look at कि अच्छा वहाँ पे एक वाईफाई लगवा देते हैं, एक ये करा देते हैं, वो तो करा देंगे ना. And you also know how you can do better language teaching and science teaching. NGOs have to ask, what do I need to get to do that? CSR has to ask, how do I make sure that that happens? And the government, of course, won't ask, but we have to tell them. And we have to keep talking to them that how do you make a systemic change in that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mrs. Priyanka Singh. And I think your ideas on an agile and adaptive response and to be really thinking about, not just collecting these ideas, but to really be implementing these ideas, how these ideas can really reach the last mile and how we can have a systematic change with government and other partners being involved. I think it just makes a lot of sense. And with this, I would now like to open the discussion. We are running slightly late. I think the initial discussion was that we'd have it for 75 to 80 minutes. We will just overshoot. I think we'll just go 10 minutes more. So we would probably wrap it up by 12:25, 12:30. Over the next 10 minutes, I would like to have have the speakers respond to each other's ideas. So maybe if we can have spotlight on all the speakers, please. And speakers, I would request you to be on the video so that we can have you on the spotlight. So starting with you, Kamal sir, how would you like to respond to? I think some very interesting points made by Mrs. Priyanka. So how would you like to respond to her ideas?
Well, I find a lot of resonance with what she's saying, and I think I probably just hinted at, particularly in the last 3 points that I tried to suggest, what are the implications for implementation. But of course, that needs much more deeper analysis, and it needs more localized solution. I mean, there's a general framework, of course, which one can suggest, but that general framework has to be worked out in local context. And I think the issue that Priyanka ji has pointed out, that we need to get the school, the government school, and the structure and system backing it up on board in this effort. It's not that school is there, government system is there, we can't do much about it, and we'll build up a parallel program with that. No, I think that really doesn't have much of much traction. And I fully agree with her that all those 3 elements, we need to bring them together in order to really have a working solution. And yes, I think very intensive local efforts are required. I mean, this, the glamour of having a huge scalable model which can be, just multiplied in terms of numbers. There is such immense diversity in our country. I think that in itself suggests that the idea of scalability really has to be in scaling up the local initiatives rather than one single solution implemented on a very large scale.
Correct. And at this point, I would like to bring in Prasoon sir to kind of share his views on you've heard the entire discussion, sir. What is your idea on or which of these ideas do you think can be actually taken to the grassroots level and where we can actually see some change happening uh, in the villages where students are getting impacted right now?
Yeah, thank you, Chirag. So one pick from what Kamalji said, we have to understand the difference between learning science and knowing science. So we have to, those who learn science should also know about science. And how do we do that? That's very important. So one thing that Kamalji missed is actually having people with a scientific temperament to start teaching science. And we really, it's a huge gap having a the temperament to scientific temperament and teaching science. And that's the reason why science has gone back to the coaching classes where we teach children only science to respond to certain questions and compete in the exam. So that's one. What Priyanka said, I totally agree with. We need to create a ground base where NGOs have a role to play, and NGOs need to and see, one is that CSR can have their own own team to implement the program, their own, but that kind of spread actually makes CSR program very thin, and so you are not creating resources at the local level, and that's the reason why you need to have NGOs. CSR should come out, and not only financially but also in terms of providing them academic resources to grow. That should be the aim of CSR programs. The CSR programs, apart from implementing directly, and I know it's a dream kind of initiative, but we need to move forward. And since the schools have started opening, so now we are moving from digital to more of an offline mode. So when we are talking about digital mode, we are only talking of process of teaching. We are not talking of actual teaching. So now it's a time to start thinking of about actual thinking. How do we influence children so that they are able to learn enough to also fill the gap if they have missed that gap. And this is particularly true for primary school children, because primary school children 2 years is a big gap. So if a child is not able to understand fraction, decimal, she will not understand maths, more abstract arguments in maths or science or even language. And missing that, those critical 2 years are, it's a great miss. So we need to make up with that. And that's what is my take from the entire panel discussion. And of course, Kishanji spoke about his initiative, and I really appreciate Tata Consultancy Service. I also had an opportunity to collaborate with Tata Trust, and I see they are very sincere about whatever they do, and they're really sincere about changing the society wherever they work. Thank you very much, Chirag.
So, and while these ideas are important, sir, there's one very fundamental question I would like to speak to Kishan on this. And while these ideas, conceptual clarity, building capacity amongst teachers, all these things are important, but then in these specific situation, in the COVID situation, when we have, when there's no network in rural areas, in many areas, there is no connectivity, it's difficult to reach out to students, schools would be opening, would be closing. What specific actions, in your opinion, or how, in what way can we really have these students continue education?
Thanks, Chirag, for asking this question. And thanks, Prasunji, for bringing out your engagement with Tata Trust. I think I would.
The question is from Pramod Kumar. It's just in the chat, so I picked it from there.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pramodji, for asking this question. So I think I would go back to what Priyanka ji shared and forget about TCS or even NGO. Two responses that comes to my mind. One is certainly as an individual, what can I do? And second, I think how as this force of collective individuals held the government also responsible. I know that it is really a very, very challenging task, but the reach that the government can have and also and has, not can have, I mean, having worked as a primary school teachers for 2 years, I also understand the limitations that the teachers face not to have any sort of over expectations from them. But I believe our efforts, like the role that corporate can play, is certainly to bring out that what is the best practice, the role that NGOs plays, that how to ensure the execution, and also to have that humane connect wherever the corporate is lacking or missing, which usually is case with multiple organizations. But these two things can be clubbed and enable the government's efforts. The scale and the reach that is required cannot be achieved by any corporate. Like, even if we consider the budget of the top 10 spenders of the CSR's organizations, it would be just a fraction of what government can and shall or can have an access and also kind of the mandate to. So I think again, coming back to the point that how as an individual, a responsible citizen of whether NGO or a corporate or even civic society, what can I do to influence that system which is there to serve us, and how do I become an enabler? Because it's easy to critique. The situations have really been difficult, has been, as Priyanka ji brought out again, but as a catalyst or a change agent in whichever system I am in, what and how can I influence so that collectively we are better off?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very powerful idea that you've just shared. Is influencing and enabling existing systems, and and becoming an enabler yourself, so that there can be a systemic movement, and it is required. And all of us, all the CSRs and all the NGOs, what they can do is just a little bit compared to what the system can do, and the system is really strong. I mean, at least the structure of it is really strong. We need to really find ways to make it work, so that we can get the deliveries that we really want. So, and I see Mrs. Priyanka not really in complete agreement there, and I get it, and hence the discussion, because we really want these ideas and opinions to come forth. So, coming back to you, Priyanka ji, if you could share your ideas on how we can really, because see, 200 million students coming back to school after like 17, 18 months, and massive gap, like they're not behind by just 2 years, they're behind by like 3, 4 years. So we are looking at a very, very serious, precarious situation. And, and I personally feel, I mean, that we really need to strengthen our systems, and we need to really go all guns blazing to figure out a solution to this situation. So what are your thoughts on this?
See, first I would say, stop looking at the quantum of what CSR and NGOs can do. The government has scale, but what is the point? So I would say stop looking at that. We need to start looking at what is the value add. It's almost like, the doctors would say, should I save one life and spend my energy in that? Or should I spend my energy on creating something that will save 100 lives? It's not an either and or choice. Nah? You need to do both. The only choice is, you will do one thing, I will do another thing, based on our competencies, our aptitudes. It is not an either or situation. So if we agree that it is not an either-or situation, then what is the comparative advantage that you have? The comparative advantage of CSR money, even if it is 0.05% of the country's spending in social welfare, the comparative advantage is it can be a catalyst. The comparative advantage is it is flexible. Anybody who has raised money, whether it is for private business or NGOs or anything, or a temple, anybody who has raised money will know that a free money of 1 rupee is equal to 10 rupees of tithe money. Are we going to agree to that or not? If we agree to that, then what is it that the value add of even this small amount that is there on the table can do? Number one. Similarly, NGOs also have to look at, by like for example, in Udaipur region, southern Rajasthan, and let's say areas of Orissa AP border, huge reverse migration has happened. Huge reverse migration. Construction sites in urban areas, huge reverse migration has happened. Displacement of families. What's happening to those kids? Because there were families living there. They were living in are you going to wait? Can you even have a scalable program at that? So my first response would be that we have to stop looking at it's not a choice. This question, this debate is a wrong debate. The only debate to have is what can I do where I am? And as an individual, no, I don't have too much of an agency. But where I am located, what is my comparative advantage and what can I do? Is my comparative advantage as a CSR head to try and change the government? No. My comparative advantage as a CSR head is to do two things. One, use my own money in the best possible way, sensitize my board and CSR committee to do that. And three, keep nibbling at the CSR laws with the MCA. That is my comparative advantage. So that's the first thing I would say. And now second, building on what the question that you asked and also what I think, you rightly said, now you'll have children coming back and you have to start from where the children are, not where they are expected to be. And we just spoke about it, that each child will be at such a different stage. And the coming will also be staggered. I don't know how different states are doing. Some states are calling one class one day, the other class the other day. Some states are doing that within a class, 10 children are coming Monday, 10 children are coming 20, 30, 40, so much. How's the teacher going to do that? Can you create a module for that? You can't. The only thing that you can do is remind the teacher that the teacher has wisdom. He has or she has her own brains and own judgment, and she needs to use that to see how does she deal with children who have lost on almost 2 years of no relationship to learning, talking to adults, learning with peers, and subject knowledge is, I don't know where, each child is different at where. So how are you going to do? So the only thing that I think will work is give confidence to the teachers. Go back to the teacher. Do whatever. You want to train them on maths, train them. But the process has to be that give them confidence that they can use it. And the only way you can give them confidence is not by scale and money, is by a connect, by respect, by trust, which doesn't come in. I mean, it's the simplest thing to do, but the most difficult thing to do, no? So that is what my response would be.
Got that, Ms. Priyanka. And I think, so though it looks different on the outside, but I think these are two very similar ideas, because influencing in enabling existing systems, and then we all can become our enablers, and we can use our comparative advantages as corporates, as NGOs, and we can really build models and deliver on those models, which can then be replicated by the government, and that is where scale can come in. So I mean, broadly similar ideas, and maybe Kisan, you would want to kind of comment on that or add something to that, what you had said and how Mrs. Priyanka responded.
I think Chirag, you summed it up. It cannot be. I mean, there is a comment, and don't want to take up on anything in the chat window, that there is a 6% of GDP assigned to education by government, and I mean, I don't know the factual aspect of where it is spent and what is the criteria of it, but just think about 6% of it. And who is responsible for this amount? So again, to quote from TCS's side, as a citizen, I think I am equally responsible for my own community and society. And at the same time, I won't disagree with Priyanka ji that the comparative advantage that TCS or Tata Group has, we certainly are leveraging. And there are phenomenal changes and transformations across the levels and layers. Even as a corporate and even as a socially responsible entity, we are uh, 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 bringing that aspect of catalytic changes in the system. But my appeal to myself and to everyone present here is that how do I bring out the best of what I am, the best of what I can do in the system where I am placed in, and hence influence the larger system. I mean, it starts. It starts with the self. I again would like to build on that. So thanks for this point, and I also don't see any sort of separation of it. I mean, the scale that we are dealing with. Also, it cannot be one path for all. Content is also relevant in different contexts. So what is the context and what is the content? We ought to see the dynamics and synchronicity of that as well.
Sure, absolutely. And Kamal sir, if I were to come to you with one final question, if you were to suggest 3 ideas, and I know it's a difficult one that I'm throwing at you, but if you were to suggest just 3 ideas on 3 steps that we need to take to really tackle the situation at hand, to really wherein we can build on whatever there is and maybe build on or cover up the loss uh, in this in the shortest possible time. If you were to kind of propose 3 ideas towards that, 200 million students going to school, massive gaps, 3 ideas on how or what steps should be taken right now to plug these gaps.
Chirag, before trying to venture on 3 possible suggestions, I would like to make a general comment on, I think, the very basic question that you're raising, that that we are in a crisis. It's a major crisis, and what can we do in that situation? You see, there are 2 ways to look at it, and one I would say is that it is such crises or disasters which expose the sort of underbelly of our system also, that a system which is fundamentally stronger is able to face such disasters, overcome them, and recover from them fast. And when that underbelly is exposed and there are inherent weaknesses in the system, your options in the crisis situation also get restricted. So I would say that number 1 for me would be to look at both the situation from both sides. One, as Priyanka ji is saying, what can we do in our own situations to handle this crisis? What are the immediate things possible? And I think the first thing that occurs to me is to somehow reach out to those children. And here I would like to assert that, trying to find the best way of reaching out to the children basically means whatever way is possible, rather than getting biased that, oh, digital is the only way to reach them, or I mean, a mix of whatever is available to the best of our abilities, but also being very aware that, whichever options we are taking, we need to be very aware of its limitations, its flexibilities, its possibilities, and we need to have a multidimensional approach. Secondly, we really need to think at this moment. It's very important in a crisis to think with a long-term perspective, because I think to say that we will overcome this crisis and then we will solve the basic issues that I think would be a very short-sighted approach. So, for example, in case of science education, since I was talking about that, I would say that this is the time also to question what our understanding of objectives of science teaching in the elementary stage is. What the understanding, what are by our, I mean, the entire society, the teachers, the parents, and it has to be addressed now, because the solution will depend on what we are able to set there. This is the meaningful thing to do in this crisis, rather than trying to say that, oh, we were doing it like this, so we can't change it now, and we need to keep doing the same thing. This is also the time to think very innovatively, go back to the roots, understand the implications, and the time is pressing, but the time is also pressing for the right ideas, not just press for any solution that you think will do. And the third, I would say, there are a lot of resources around, hidden resources, human resources, individuals who think, and this is the time to mobilize them. I mean, there might be a lot of pessimism around, but this is the time to curate those resources, mobilize them, and we need support to be able to do that. And I think, many times we are ourselves not aware of the type of resources that we have to overcome such a situation, and go for a very unidimensional approach that, oh, we will only do this and hope for the solution to come out of it. So I think all my 3 points are basically to look at the whole situation in greater depth. I mean, a crisis requires a more well thought out, well understood response, rather than a hurried response. That is what I would like to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you. These are absolutely brilliant insights, sir. And I mean, obviously brings forth a wealth of experience and learning that you've obviously acquired over the years. So to sum it all up, I would finally like to bring in Prasoon sir. Prasoon sir, 2 minutes. We've overshot and we're really stressed on time. But since it was a very, very interesting and engaging discussion, I did allow it to continue. If you could just sum up the discussion about 2 minutes or so for all our guests.
Thank you, Chirag. So thank you very much. So we have also moved from subjects from general to more subjects. So now it's time for us to have such kind of meeting around evidence. So evidence with whatever discussion we had, whatever input was given from academic and other aspects of improving learning, we need to get evidence and talk about it. And it's very important, because now we have discussed the theory. That's what I like to close, and that's what I'll take forward from all these, not only this meeting, also the 3 meeting that preceded this meeting. And thank you very much, all of you, and we should be in touch, and we should be taking this forward, not only during COVID time, but beyond COVID, as we have discussed, that it's not COVID related. It started something historically, and we need to make some historical correction. So since COVID gave us the opportunity to discuss this, and we should be more thankful to COVID by actually addressing this problem. And thank you very much. So that's where I should end, Chirag. Thank you, Kishanji. Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Kamalji. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you summed it up very, very beautifully. We should look at this as an opportunity, and this opportunity gives us an idea to correct something which is historically done wrong. I mean, the way the teaching learning was approached, and then hopefully this correction then prepares us for such future lockdown situations also. So with that said, I would like to thank you all the guests and all the panelists for taking out time and being a part of this session. This was one of the most, though we have had, generally there are 150 plus participants, though we have had lesser number of participants, but I personally really enjoyed this session the most. I think this was one of the most transparent discussions on what action steps need to be taken and what really needs to be done in this scenario. So thank you so much for being a part of the session, and looking forward to connecting with you again soon. Bye-bye. Take care and have a good day.